Be dropping Hosea 12, where Jacob is locked in a weeping compliance loop, and Amos, who proves, get ready, hold on to your hats. Amos tells us that in the desert, they were carrying the star god. Yeah, not kidding. So I call it the road trip from hell, guys. I remember way back, I would say, oh, the road trip from hell with Moses. Yeah, well, there you go. We're going to get into that a little more deeply, and you may not have heard this before. In all of our podcasters and influencers, like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Russell Brand, suddenly just all Christian. Everybody get to church. Hurry up. Go get to church. Go get to the Solomonic Church. And everyone sloughs that off like it's not important, while simultaneously looking at occult rituals in the news. And I'm like, guys, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. If you don't remember, or if you don't think you're interested in the woo-woo part of this story, I'm going to tell you. Go listen to the woo-woo part of this story. Okay? It's critical. It's a critical piece. And you can review that back in the Apotheosis series. There are 3 videos that we do sort of in the middle to the end of the Apotheosis series, and they all deal with astral projection. But what we're doing is taking this cult, okay, the cult that attacked me for 48 years, that cult, and putting their own writings, their own claims right on the screen to expose it. They say they're doing this. And everyone goes, wow, yeah, one world government, new world order, economic takeover. That's all in those documents. Yes, they are. But you know what else is in those documents? Astral attack. Nobody who's looking at the NWO, New World Order, whatever the hell, is looking at the occult side of it. They're seeing blood rituals and criminal behavior coming out in the news by their favorite political and famous figures, and they're appalled by it. But no one is connecting the woo-woo side of New Age occult with their rituals. Their paperwork says, we're doing this. I stand up and say, this was done to me, and somehow that's crazy. No, that's crazy. Well, I'm just telling you that they did to me what the freaking paperwork says. That's how I figured it out. I read their paperwork, and I'm like, oh. Not only do they have this grand plan of this one world government, an economic feudalist system, but they also are attacking people. They say that in their paperwork. Hi, and welcome to our Bible study channel.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. Love to all those in the flesh, all of those who are listening. Don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.
These are videos that go pretty in depth First thing you should probably do is pause and read our 12 rules for reading biblical text. And if you don't like the 12 rules or you don't understand the 12 rules, well, I don't have time to explain them all. Go back to the book that I wrote and uploaded on this channel, which takes you through the entire arc and how we made these quote unquote 12 rules as a framework of what we found after 7 years digging meticulously and carefully through the text. So if you're confused, go do that. If I refer back, well, that's probably because we actually post these things in order. So they're all done in series. And if you jump in at the middle of a series without any schema or background knowledge, and you get all pissed off, well, that's also not our problem. This is a group where we go line by line, scroll by scroll through the text. Warning, we are not language sensitive, so if you can't handle some cussing, it's not the place for you. We also do not endorse nor approve of pretty much any mainstream theology. So if you're looking for that, also definitely not the place for you. We do a video about the characters that we use in our Bible study series. And the reason we do this is sort of so that they can kind of get in your head. So we do have a video explaining why we chose the people we chose and how their sort of energy characteristics go along with the biblical characters to modernize it for people so they know what the heck we're reading. Clearly, the Roman Church was not doing their job and looking for the lost sheep of the reunited House of David. So that's what we're doing, okay? We're taking that away from them because they screwed it up. The brilliant rabbis also down there in Babylon are also not looking for the lost sheep of the reunited kingdom of David. So you're not going to hear, let's follow Rome. And you're not going to hear, let's follow the rabbis on this channel. Because, you know, sorry, not sorry, but the Bible wasn't actually written for the corrupt Levitical priesthood post-Babylon and Persia to read it through their little janky books. And it also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of pagan 4th century church fathers. So we're not doing that either. You guys can both have a seat. Oddly enough, the Bible also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of some dumbass scholars with pieces of paper that say they're smarter than everyone, but have never seen a Davidic covenant in their life. Not written for them either. You know who it's written for? It's written for the reunited house of David, who are actually in covenant and are actually the sheep. That's who it's written for. That's why nobody else can understand what the heck's going on. What you are going to hear is what you're supposed to hear, which is, let's follow the king. And let's get started.
So, we are going to war.
And welcome back. Welcome back. We're doing something different today. Basically, if you remember last time in episode 1, I said we didn't have an agenda because we didn't know what the heck we were doing and where we're going. Well, we sort of know where we're going, sort of, but you know, one thing leads to another. So what we're going to do today is we're going to slow down and we're going to go through an overall agenda for the entire David Solomon series. So in other words, we're going to give you the answer at the back of the book before we show you the receipts and the evidence throughout this series. So we're gonna start at the end and then give a quick summary and then go back to our next episode, which will be episode 3, but really full episode 2, which is the L conundrum. But there's a lot of moving pieces here. And my brain's a little overwhelmed, you guys. I told you when we do new series and we're not just editing the old ones, you're gonna see how the sausage is made. And sometimes that takes a pretty big break as my brain sorts out the connections and also plan future spiraling. So I decided, you know what, I'm a little overwhelmed. So we'll just start at the back and go to the front, sort of backlog this. So we're just going to do, this will be a quicker one today, I certainly hope. And I'm just going to kind of go through and read these slides because I wrote them up for myself, for my own notes, and then just kind of copy and pasted them in. And so I'll kind of talk about them as we go, and hopefully it'll give you a big picture and nothing in here. Some things in here, you're like, what the heck? Maybe. But I assure you, we're going to go back and pull all the receipts for these as we go. But this might sort of allow us not to be stuck grinding our gears right now. With the decisions of what do I show, what do I don't show, how does this lead to that? If you have the whole damn picture up front, then the job moving forward is a whole lot easier, right? And we can kind of jump around back to Luke and do some other stuff while we're unfolding this, because this is a giant scaffolding piece.
May I wait so patiently, lying on the floor? I'm just trying to do my jigsaw puzzle before it rains anymore.
And like I said, we'll revisit each of these. I'm actually planning to pull each slide from today's presentation and make it a presentation on its own. Perhaps combining a few along the way, but you get the idea. Okay, so there's a whole lot more, but these are the big ticket items that we'll be going through over the next several weeks through this series that we pulled out. Okay, this series is hard for us because these are things, when we are doing a small study group, these are things that we know, right? Like we're having conversations, we're connecting on our little social media channels and our text, so we're doing a lot of posting and yapping with each other and phone calls and, oh my gosh, I just thought of this, and we talk about it for an hour. And so these are some things that we know, but we didn't actually make a slide deck about in the past. So we're trying to figure out how to pull all these pins and detonate a few bombs as we go through. So here's some background knowledge to get to your brains where our brains have been for quite some time. All right, here we go. So it's really an agenda, and some of it is a schema review, just to make sure we've got the scaffolding of the premises that we're going to lay out here. So the first things first, we have to remember the primitive cue card reality of quote unquote ancient Hebrew language. That there's no pre-exile, standalone, phonetic, grapheme, phoneme, systematic reading, writing language called original ancient Hebrew. Okay? That doesn't exist. The text layer is strictly consonant-only Phoenician mnemonic cue cards. Okay? This is the legal shorthand for an oral culture. Not a written ancient scrolls that are all collected in one big long story. So these late few hundred years ago, Masoretic vowel pointing, vowel adding is post-exile Pig Latin to us, okay? It's a software designed by corporate scribal factories, okay? Political factions of the last 900 years, 700 years, 600 years, designed to alter the story and force harmonization of the historical record. And if that's not understood, go all the way back to the Bigfoot Hebrew scroll video where we show what happens with we the people being changed to we the people with just a vowel change, okay? So it's really important to understand the faction that you are getting the Masoretic text from. And although we do look at Hebrew concepts and occasionally a Hebrew breakdown of some verses, it's people's brains are still at ancient Hebrew language is the original, okay? They're still there. And instead of thinking it's a tool, but we need to know who developed the tool. Does that make sense? And to attribute this tool all the way back to ancient times is doing yourself a disservice. The other problem that comes into play is because of that cognitive science language fact, what it does to theories like JEDP or JEPD, I always get it mixed up, and the Q documents and the Dead Sea Scrolls and all these things, what it does to these theories is it literally rips the guts out of them. I've said before, I like the JE whatever theory, JEDP, JEPD. I like the theory, but I like it because it gets people out of the thinking that the Bible dropped out of God's lap and into Moses's lap, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago as a perfect book. You know, if nothing else, if that theory does nothing else, that's a good first step. But the problem again is with the dating, the languages, and how they're grouping the factions. We've talked about this before in Ritual Apotheosis piece. So go back and find that. And how you can't group people based on language style. Okay? It's the language style. This writer sounds like this writer, so we'll put them together and like give it a label for a time period. You can't. That is so unscientific. So when you tear the guts out of that and just use it to understand that there were different factions coming to the text, okay, that's where it's useful. The rest of it, of who wrote what, and that something exists called a Yahwist source, and a Deuteronomist source, and that those sources are attributed to those factions, that's not scientific at all. It's not historical, and it's not archaeological. It's, like I said, the ELA teachers of theories. And it's going away. That theory is going away from academia. So we have to remember the language piece and what we're dealing with. Okay, so that being said, we've also got to talk about this El and Yahweh, this brand label conglomerate, and that's sort of where we're going to try to finish out next time with the El thing, and how they're not specific, personal, holy names revealed to the people by God. You need to think of it like a trademark, okay? They're a trademark label merging completely separate entity behavior profiles into a single composite mishmash God. All right. We've got Jesus and David's God is a sovereign extraction force. And we've used the word extraction before when it comes to my woo-woo experience. But let's start to think of that. We're going to start to think of that through biblical text, an extraction force through the text. And it's functioning entirely separate from the top-down pyramid style, centralized corporate deities, okay? I want you to think of, as we get into El, we're going to talk a little bit about BlackRock. And imagine BlackRock, where it's just like, they just own everything, right? And you have an illusion of choice. It's like, oh, look, you can choose Coke or Pepsi. You can choose Fox. It's just a franchise choice of the same giant corporations. Does that make sense? They have different names out on the street. They have different franchises in different areas. But at the end of the day, it's all going up to the top. Okay. This is sort of how El is going to work. It's like that conglomerate of corporate entityism. And that's the best way I could think of to describe our El franchises that we're going to get into next time. So there's a little preview for that. The next thing we're working on, and we do not have an answer for this, okay? We honestly don't have an answer for this one. So you're really getting a view on how the sausage is made. But we thought it's important that we're working on it and we're churning our brains on it right now, but we haven't come up with the answer. And it's getting even harder to find answers. 7 or 8 years ago, when we started this study group privately, you were able to go into a search engine and much more easily pull up primary sources and actual PhD scholars, right? That are like award-winning scholars. Example, Sarah Jaffet. Okay, I mentioned her back in the book. She's the one that did the Chronicles piece and that Judahite Ephrathite piece. This woman is an award-winning, top-notch, cream of the crop scholar. Okay, she's not a Heiser or an Ehrman Hawken books. This is like cream of the crop scholarship, very well respected, award-winning scholarship. And these are the types of people that we prefer to go to than your what we call pop culture scholars, right? Who are working for hustling for a paycheck that we roast all the time on here. It's so much harder to dig out scholarship, primary sources, and information now that a lot of the search engines are sacrificing you over to AI. Because what AI does is it'll search, the consensus, quote unquote, or the most common answers, right? And it's like, it's sticking through shit like Reddit. Like, I'm not going to find anything that I need searching Reddit and Facebook and Instagram, and Aunt Sally's post from YouTube. Like, that's not helping me. So to bypass those structures of the quote unquote mass consensus is getting so much more difficult. And so it's taking us more time. And one of the things that we're looking for and digging for now is this. The topographical real estate fraud, we're going to call it. We are having a very, very difficult time with the tourist map generally accepted city of David, which is Zion, right? Because supposedly, if you go and visit, we'll take a look at a picture of this, but it's basically a glorified football field that sits right below the quote unquote Temple Mount, or where they claim the Temple Mount is. And on one side, you've got a valley, and on the other side, you've got a valley. And right at the foot of this step down area that's supposedly the city of David, Zion, it literally looks like a toilet bowl if you pull up a picture, okay? Where there's just this hill over the top behind it, right? And then moving south, you've got this toilet bowl. And then the valleys go up to the west, the valleys go up to the east, and in front of you in the south is this giant, vast wasteland with towering limestone cliffs that go straight down. And where does it go straight down to? Well, that would be Gehenna. We are not convinced that a guerrilla warfare tactical genius like David is going to put himself in the lowest position, flanked on three sides by giant hills. It doesn't make sense that he's sitting down in this toilet bowl. And what also doesn't make sense in our head is if the Temple Mount, if Solomon's Temple is supposedly where they say it is, right? Where the tourist place is today, Dome of the Rock. If that's where Solomon had the temple, and if that's where the second temple was, that means that all of the animal sacrifice blood would flow directly down the hill, covering Zion and David's city. It's sort of insulting. Like if you stood, I hate to be graphic, but if you stood on the edge of where they say the Temple Mount is, with all that blood and sacrifice flowing down into the city of David, you could stand there and take a strong, you could piss in a really strong wind and it would land. It's like the garbage heap. Okay. Like, I mean, just think of they didn't have plumbing, right? It was dirty. It's dusty. Like I lived in the Middle East now with like running water, and it's disgusting and dirty and dusty. And you have to be really meticulous about staying clean. So the disease, the waste, the human waste, the blood waste, the ritual waste would literally flow right down into the city of David. And that seems a little ritually disgusting, sort of like he was demoted down to the bottom. So it's like, yeah, the city of David is beneath the sacrifice flow of the temple. That's how the tourist map designs it. So we're not convinced. We're not convinced that the city of David, the Zion, is where it says it is. Nor are we necessarily convinced that the Temple Mount is where they say it is. But we haven't found an answer to prove that inkling in our gut, right or wrong yet. So we're just exploring that idea. It just seems to be a decoy property, and militarily it would be a sitting duck. And we know, what we do know is that the authentic Davidic contract and the Ephrathite birthright are anchored to a liminal sovereign ridge. We know that from where David did his census. We know that from where Resheph bore down on Zion. It's a liminal space. And it seems as though the temple platform, if it's the geography and the topographical information that we have now on the tourist map, then that means the temple platform was literally engineered as a top-down gold-extracting blood funnel whose ritual waste and runoff physically and legally would smother David's Zion. So it's like it goes from the temple, flows into David's city of Zion, and then flows right into hell. So basically your first stop before hell would be Zion. And that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sit right with our stomachs. And David's right there at the edge of Gehenna. That's where he built his city. Right there in the middle of the flow of the ritual sacrifice. And the other thing is, when there is rain, when there is rain, you would have a southern torrential flood that would just sweep it right into the sea, and just wipe out David in one good winter rain. So we're having a lot of problem with that, but we certainly haven't gotten close to cracking that nut yet, and proving our inkling right or wrong. But it's something to think about. We're going to take a look at some of those pictures as we talk about Moloch, sacrifice, the sacrifices of these gods we'll be addressing, and some of the more occult symbolism and ritual work that we'll be tackling as we go. Because it's just strange when you think of the rituals flowing right down on the city of David. But I digress. We can't prove it, neither here nor there. It just doesn't sit right with us. So, but maybe it is, and we're crazy, but we're still digging. And we've got the AI block going right now. Okay, let's see. It was much easier 10 years ago. I wish I had this question 10 years ago. But next, we're going to talk about a two-front salvage mission. We've already talked about this before, but I want to bring it back up. How Jesus did not teach the Jew-Gentile binary. It was a localized street-level salvage and extraction protocol, and he's reclaiming the lost sheep or the lost nodes of those tribes alongside any contract defecting pagan. So if there's any pagan that wants to leave their contract and join this one, and they understand the command structure like we saw with the centurion, they are welcome to join. And this is a big one because as we continue in Luke, we are going to see, interestingly, that the trail of Jesus's mission goes right through the major, heaviest areas of dispersion. And that's really cool, both from the north and from the south. and that's kind of a cool thing that we'll talk about. as we start to talk about the landscape a little bit. So that's going to be in here. The other thing we've got is our post-credit viral outbreak. After our salvage mission is successful, and we talked about Acts 1 through 8 being the theology in our little resurrection series we started. It's the authentic resurrection victory. So everyone's hugging in the streets, you know. If you think of a movie, the hero's done, high-fiving everybody, and we have our happy, good ending. And then suddenly, the credits roll. The screen goes dark and the credits roll. And if you sit in the seat long enough, sometimes they have the prequel, right? And they'll show you that little flash. So it's like, you know, we saved the world. And then all of a sudden, the post-credit horror sequence, where like Saul of Tarsus, you can think of it as like the stray monkey that gets out of the lab, right? And like the whole city's decimated. And there's like one little smoking vial that they left behind in the lab, like, you know, rolled under the table or something. And the monkey escapes and grabs that vial and runs off into the wilderness. That's Saul of Tarsus. Or like, you know, Michael Myers, the big enemy, was defeated. He got shot 6 times and fell off a balcony, and everyone's free. And then you look, and he's gone. He took off into the wilderness, right? And it's setting you up for the sequel. Well, that's Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus is our post-credit feral monkey running around with a vial. Okay. He gets his hardware hijacked by this Syrian Aram storm god deity that has the frequency of Baal and Resheph or something like those two. And he resurrects that Psalm 78 curse over the north. But he's wrapping it in Greek pagan software language to usher Ephraim right into that baptism of death. And here's the next part. Corporate, tax, and forced labor compliance. You hear a lot of conspiracy people or out in the not even conspiracy people, just in the political world and arguing about, you know, left, right, Republican, Democrat, Illuminati, top of the pyramid, all that stuff. You hear a lot of people talk about being a debt slave with the Federal Reserve and the fiat money system and the global banking cartel, yada, yada, yada. Like I said, we don't talk about current politics on this channel. What we do is we talk about ancient politics, and we let you draw your own conclusions and parallels to today, should you choose to do so. But Solomon was basically your first central banking cartel, and we're going to have to lay that out as well. The top of the pyramid. We already talked about this a little bit, but we'll continue to lay out the positives and negatives of the JEPD or DP theory. And when you understand our position on that theory, we have to lay the premise that we look strictly at the behavior profiles of the gods, their contract parameters and jurisdictions, and their legal signatures. Okay, we don't look at the names, because the names were written back in based on the 18th century and the Masoretic vowel system. So just because you pull up the names of God Bible and it says Yahweh here and El Shaddai there, doesn't mean that's accurate. It means that's a later write-in and we don't trust them. What we do trust is understanding the gods to the point where we can say, that's this guy. That sounds like that guy. Just sort of like we did with Resheph and Baal-Hadad, and looked at those profiles and said, it might not be them, but it's a god that's pretty much like them. Like, that's the same signature. It's the same MO. It's the same moves, where we can sort of put them in a rough category to try to identify them, rather than use thousands of years later, baloney language rewrites. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and why we do that, and continue to remind ourselves of that. Just because the text says Yahweh doesn't mean anything. Okay, that really doesn't. The guys who put that in are the same guys that invented the Yahweh in the 19th century. And we talked about a few places to go and look up that as well. Now we've got our Bronze Age corporate franchise model. And this is where, we're going to continue mapping the Yahwehs and the L's, or the L assembly, because this is sort of like the absent landlord CEO model. If you know any of Heiser's work, if you just think of Heiser and his Yahweh, but what he did was he took El conglomerate and slapped Yahweh's name onto El Elyon. That's what he did. He's using an ancient Ugaritic family of gods, if you will, and in applying that to quote unquote Yahweh, because he wants to make it harmonize. But he knows better. He knows that he's using the family structure of El because he likes the personality of El better than he likes personality of Yahweh. So he's using the profile of El Elyon, and then slapping Yahweh's name on it to try to harmonize everything. And it's not going to work, Heiser. We see you. We see you, Michael Heiser. You tricky little evangelical you. So we'll continue to map that when we get to L. Then we have the intercepted mailbox. I get really pissed when I think of the ritual series, I made a comparison and said, why are you reading my mail? And not only are you reading my mail, but you're reading the mail and you're editing it and then putting it back in my mailbox and telling me it says something else. Well, welcome to the gods, the false gods of the ancient Near East. So we've been tracking a little bit the second and third voice heists or hijackings. And so we're going to review where we found that second voice split in Genesis 15, right after between verse 6 and 7, where we had a clean deal between Abraham and one God that had no blood rituals, no tax, no quid pro quoing. And then the very next sentence, he's taken over by the weirdo with the birds of the darkness and the ritual butchery. And he also signed up to a 400-year liability project. So we've got all of this. We've got that two voices that we looked at pretty cleanly before in Genesis. But we're going to take that model and we're going to go a little further with our L's here. We also touched on the Leviticus firstborn extraction grid, where a God said to the Levites, firstborn's ours, right? I give you over to this Lord. And it's this top-down corporate restructuring where the franchise of the L's claims ownership over all the firstborn biological sons and enforce that head-for-head currency tax with the Levite priesthood. We looked at that really briefly, and I think it was in Luke somewhere, maybe when we went off on our David's bread tangent. I think it was there. We're going to dig into that a little more about the Levitical extortion piece and that God. And then we are going to have to look at our other patriarch, Jacob. Oh, Jacob. Jacob in his panic loop. And we're going to audit some pieces of our prophets here too. Because when you decode Jacob's interaction with ancient Near East entities, he sort of has a panic loop at the latter gate. And then he gives a 10% tribute offer to the tax gods in the corporate godhead of El Elyon. And we're also going to be dropping Hosea 12, where Jacob is locked in a weeping compliance loop. And Amos, who proves, get ready, hold on to your hats. Amos tells us that in the desert, they were carrying the star god. Yeah, not kidding. So I call it the road trip from hell, guys. I remember way back, I would say, the road trip from hell with Moses. Yeah, well, there you go. We're going to get into that a little more deeply. And you may not have heard this before. We've also got our Genesis 48, my favorite part that I always scream about. And this is where we have a plot twist, guys. We've got to talk about what blessing actually means and what that word means. Because We have two different definitions of blessing in the Greek, two different words. Imagine that. But your preachers and scholars just collapse it into like, it's a really great thing. No. There's two Greek words for blessing. We're going to have to go through over what a blessing is, because this is where we get the plot twist. Ephraim's had plenty of time to party and celebrate on our channel when I say Judah wasn't given the covenants. Judah was disinherited because Judah's the cub, not the lion. So Judah is trapped by the lion's scepter, and the lion signifies empire. We've done this 1,000 times. So yay! Back in Genesis 48, Ephraim's the one who gets all those covenants, including the Abrahamic one. Wow. Congratulations, Ephraim. You've had enough time to celebrate the fact that you were tagged with the name Israel. because it's not always a blessing. So Ephraim getting these covenants was a multi-generational liability, not just a lotto ticket, okay? And it tagged them with every good, bad, and ugly deal that the patriarch signed. And it's Ephraim bloodline's responsibility to clear the record and collapse the tracking loops of the cartel gods. Remember, we've talked about ritual initiations, passing down through bloodlines, generational curses, all of these things, guys, all of these things that we've talked about in the past. Well, what do you think happens when Jacob is handing down all the covenants of the fathers Abraham, Isaac? Well, we're going to read Genesis 48 a little more carefully and see why this is a lotto ticket and a liability all at the same time. Okay, be careful what you wish for, Ephraim. And that's why the Ephrathite bloodline, the remnant bloodline, had to break all of those contracts. So, when you think of the Messiah is saving us, the Messiah is freeing us. Well, freeing you from what? Yes, the Adamic death contract, but also all of those patriarchal contracts, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that were handed down through that bloodline by the patriarchs who were in split jurisdictions. There's the problem, guys. They're saddled with digging themselves out of multiple split jurisdictions. And the king foreclosed on the whole deal from these janky-ass BlackRock gods. That's the added piece of the story that we're going to lay out for you. And Jesus is going to make a whole lot more sense again. He did a whole lot more on that cross than people seem to think. So I know that's a crazy premise, but we're gonna show you. That means inheriting all covenants. Well, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Genesis 22, where Abraham walks down Mount Moriah completely alone upon the sacrifice of Isaac. And why in the heck, James, are you mentioning that in your letter? It's like, well, he did works, like, killed Isaac. Like, what? So we've got this big contradiction, right? The letter in James and the whole thing about the sacrifice of Isaac, which is not good. And what's going on here? And why? Why is Abraham leaving the scene alone? We've also got Midrashic and Talmudic ancient traditions that Isaac was actually slaughtered on the hill to expose the blood-extracting footprint of the Solomonic Edomite Yahweh and their core running software of sacrifice. So we'll report, you decide, but that's it. That's a sticky one. That's a sticky one that we'll be covering in this series also. So we've really got to ditch this romanticized, papered over illusion that the institutional church and the book shilling pseudo scholars in popular culture have painted for us this grand image of the patriarchs to show the audience that they're already living inside the same Solomonic matrix that the patriarchs were. You know, we want to think of these patriarchs as perfect and holy, and every single thing they did was following the one true God, and it's this one big monolithic story, and it isn't. It just isn't. That's not what the data shows. That's not what history shows. That's not what archaeology shows. It's not what biblical scholarship, true, award-winning, deep biblical scholarship shows. And it's certainly not what the text itself shows. So we've got to get over this idea of the patriarchs being untouchable and perfect. And we need to see them in a very human way. And the legends of these patriarchs can teach us a very mighty lesson that still applies to pretty much everyone out there today. This is the look in the mirror part. Because the patriarchs were fooled by other gods, right? We sit here and think, well, how could they be fooled into human sacrifice? How could they be fooled into being a tax slave in the Solomonic system? Well, how many of you were Christians and believed in human sacrifice at one point? How many are out there tithing and working as debt slaves for the central bank? Just saying. This all, guys, this all goes to Solomon, all of it. Why does every single religion ever tie back to Solomon? Well, that's what it is. So we got to cut the patriarchs some slack here. You know, I think when Christians first start to understand the text and look at true biblical scholarship and realize ancient Near East was multiple gods and multiple stuff going on, and there's all these Yahwehs and Els running around. And they begin to realize, wait. There's lots of gods here, and not all of them are good. And not all of them that Jacob interacted with and that Abraham interacted with were good. They tend to feel a betrayal. The atheists come out and start with their, it's all fake, throw it all away. Abraham was evil. You know, how can you sacrifice? And it's very judgmental on the evilness of the Old Testament God and the evilness of the patriarchs for following this horrid sacrificial God. But as we're unpeeling the layers, we have to be very careful, again, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because if you begin to understand ancient Near East and multiple gods, right, we're going to knock the shine off of the patriarchs for sure. But that's not disrespect, okay? These are guys living in the ancient Near East, meeting God for the first time, and sometimes the only time, and then getting dogpiled by all of the other gods in the neighborhood. They were in a rough freaking neighborhood, man. And to be confused as to which God is which, honestly doesn't surprise me. Go out there to any Christian channel and just listen to someone and see how confused they are. There's a lot of confusion, even today, but everyone's very certain that they're correct. So we're going to follow the data, we're going to follow the text, and we're going to be very, very careful and walk very gingerly. And also expose the 666 of Solomon. Yeah, I don't know why all of these conspiracy 666 people aren't tying it back to Solomon, because it's right there in the text.
Oh, the gangster looks so frightening with his Luger in his hand. But when he gets home to his children, he's a family man. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty, he can shove in his knife. Yes, he really looks quite religious.
our original 666. True story. So we'll lay that out for you. Shall we say in our intro, wake up, stop waiting for Mystery Babylon to announce itself. You're already in it. Solomon and his 666. We've got our Solomon as mayhem because he established the 12 district forced labor and taxation grid that the people were living under. He was a very ruthless and very cruel man. His foreign bedroom alliances and all the origin of this text harmonization and God harmonization blender. That's all Solomon. He was an evil little bastard. I am telling you what. We've also got our Bathsheba bedroom. She's our Jebusite or Judahite proxy, and we're not quite sure which one she is. We'll unveil that as we go. We report, you decide. But Bathsheba was a Judahite Jebusite. And we got to take a look at her sons versus the line of Nathan and why they're half brothers and not full brothers. It Chronicles again. Hi, Chronicles. We see you. And we're going to have to overlay that with that mapping that we talked about in Matthew, who's a Solomonic loyalist, versus Luke, which is the Jamesian legal brief, and how the war in David's bed literally went all the way out to the New Testament, to Matthew and Luke factions. This is a big one, guys. This next one's a big one. This is a traveling RV versus the core module split. Traveling RV is what we call the tabernacle that was out in the desert. The core module is the ark itself, the Ark of the Covenant. And because David and Solomon and those characters and legends have been so mixed and mashed together that in most people's brains, they don't separate the ark and the tabernacle in the tent of the desert, right? They just assume, well, David had a tent and the tabernacle was a tent. And so David had the ark in the tent and then the temple was made. No. David didn't have the tabernacle. David had the ark. So we have to understand that what David did, he's such a freaking badass. He left the empty mosaic tabernacle RV, right, the mobile temple, to rot at Gibeon. He left it behind. He carjacked the raw core data module or the ark itself. Okay, the ark proper, left behind the tabernacle from the desert, from the road trip from hell, and did his 6-step boundary bitch slap to their 7-step completion loop. And we're going to get a whole lot deeper into David's 6-step sacrifice versus priesthood 7-step completion. And then Solomon comes along, builds the permanent brick and mortar RV or the stone temple, and forces the ark right back into the corporate veil. And we say it caused God to bail out instantly. So I say it was never legit. We don't believe God was in that seat any longer. Once Solomon shoved him in a temple with blood ritual sacrifice, dark occult, and multiple gods. We're not buying it. That God's like, yeah, I'll just kind of hunker down here with everybody else. I don't think so. And once you understand that David didn't have the tabernacle, it's funny. They called the tabernacle all through the desert. And then they're like, oh, the tent. Yeah, the tent. It's just like David's tent. Same thing. Tabernacle, tent, David, same thing. All the same. It wasn't. He abandoned the desert tabernacle and just like ripped the engine out, which is the ark, and left the rotting RV at Gibeon. And so we need to go really deep into that and understand those implications.
Me, I'm waiting so patiently, lying on the floor. I'm just trying to do this jigsaw puzzle before it rains anymore.
We've also got to look at our second Solomon, which is all of that occult stuff, and how his reputation for a magician and an occultist and a demonologist sort of grew beyond, it's still growing today with all the Solomonic magic stuff attributed back to him, and parse out a little, man versus mythness here. With the Egyptian ritual geometry, the Persian administrative software, and the Luke. And once you understand that piece, the occult piece of it, then Luke 9-11 is when Jesus comes in and takes over and dismantles the entire system, from the financial forced labor piece, the tax piece, the centralized control piece, the conglomerate of gods part, the phonies lineage part, and the occult part. Jesus dismantles all of it. And nobody talks about that because nobody understands that. He's not working for Solomon. He's about to dismantle it in 2 whole chapters. And of course, our post-credit feral monkey, how we connect Paul to Psalm 78 Maskell and the Acts 9 Damascus Road intercept. And we look at the wedding feast parables as legal foreclosure and contract eviction notice for those without the right clothes on. And so that brings us to the ultimate, quote unquote, New World Order realization, where we have to look at General Mike Flynn and his prayer in that church, which is from Elizabeth Clare Prophet, which is from the book Dweller on 2 Planets with the Great White Brotherhood, which is the same cartel that attacked me for 48 years. Specifically, like you can imagine, I'm learning about all of this. And suddenly 6, 7, 8 years later, I hear Mike Flynn reciting the prayer from that. And I'm like, excuse me? Excuse me. And I sit stock straight up going, how the hell is something so obscure that tortured me for 48 years? How is this related to Mike Flynn and the recent modern movement of Christian nationalism and the Great Awakening tour and all of our podcasters and influencers like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Russell Brand? Suddenly just all Christian. Everybody get to church. Hurry up. Go get to church. Go get to the Solomonic church. It's just strange to me, knowing my personal experience and how that Mike Flynn prayer in his little Save America tour links directly to Elizabeth Clare Prophet, which links directly to the Great White Brotherhood, Ascended Masters, and the God government, where everybody gets to go to temple training school at night. Remember, we talked about this. If you don't remember, or if you don't think you're interested in the woo-woo part of this story, I'm going to tell you. Go listen to the woo-woo part of this story. Okay? It's critical. It's a critical piece. And you can review that back in the Apotheosis series. There are 3 videos that we do sort of in the middle to the end of the Apotheosis series, and they all deal with astral projection. But what we're doing is taking this cult, okay, the cult that attacked me for 48 years, that cult, and putting their own writings, their own claims right on the screen to expose it. They say they're doing this. And everyone goes, wow, yeah, one world government, new world order, economic takeover. That's all in those documents. Yes, they are. But you know what else is in those documents? Astral attack. Nobody who's looking at the NWO, New World Order, whatever the hell, is looking at the occult side of it. They're seeing blood rituals and criminal behavior coming out in the news by their favorite political and famous figures, and they're appalled by it. But no one is connecting the woo-woo side of New Age occult with their rituals. Their paperwork says, we're doing this. I stand up and say, this was done to me, and somehow that's crazy. No, that's crazy. Well, I'm just telling you that they did to me what the freaking paperwork says. That's how I figured it out. I read their paperwork, and I'm like, oh. Not only do they have this grand plan of this one world government, an economic feudalist system, but they also are attacking people in the grid, in the astral. And they say that in their paperwork. And everyone sloughs that off like it's not important, while simultaneously looking at occult rituals in the news. And I'm like, guys, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. And from that same group, we get that prayer from Mike Flynn. From those same people, we get the Gate of Palmyra doing the world tour, which we talked about back in our Bible series. So we're going to rehash all this stuff, and not to retell the story, but simply to connect all those dots and make it really fucking obvious, guys. It's not just, oh, the New World Order is coming and they're going to put Elon Musk's going to put a chip in your brain and they're trying to crash the stock market. Okay, yeah, but there's a whole lot more there. And it comes from the Solomonic system. And hitching the Solomonic system and calling it David. And because it's called David, well, then we get to slap Jesus in there too. That's what I'm saying. It all adds together. Okay. So the current world order is just running Paul's customized software, or the rabbi software, or the New Age software. It's all the same, because it all leads to Solomon's hardware of forced labor, brutal treatment of the common people, extracting their wealth, abusing them, and using ritual, magic, and occult to gain and keep their power. It all goes together. That's what we're saying. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this through the lens of the Solomonic hijack of every major religion and spiritual movement out there today. And it's terrifying when you put all of it together. It really is. It really is. We've also got our younger son protocol. We always hear about the firstborn, right? Everyone's my firstborn dipshit. Well, we also have a younger son protocol. How the true creator, he bypasses the janky God's law of the firstborn. And he's constantly popping in that genealogy to do that hard legal workaround from the compliance loop of the firstborn. If you think of all the sons and all these lineages, until King Jesus, they're not the firstborns. He's bypassing the Levitical firstborn rule all the way down.
And the guitar players look damaged. They've been outcasts all their lives. Me, I'm waiting so patiently, lying on the floor. I'm just trying to do this jigsaw puzzle before it rains anymore. Oh, there's 20,000 grandmas wave their hankies in the air. I'm burning up their pensions and shouting, it's not fair. There's a regiment of soldiers standing looking on, and the queen is bravely shouting, what the hell is going on? With a blood-curdling tally-ho, she charged into the ranks and blessed all those grandmas who with their dying breath scream thanks.
Ephraim's my firstborn. Ephraim's my firstborn. Ephraim's my firstborn. Okay. But Ephraim wasn't the firstborn. Ephraim was the younger. Firstborn of God, not firstborn son of man. So there's a lot of legal maneuvering and spiritual meaning behind why does God never choose the firstborn? Well, if you know about the Levitical firstborn tax, right, then it makes sense. He's bypassing the God of the firstborn tax, so that they're not held to that extortion. So that leads us to our next video. You can see all the things swimming in my brain to try to pull this together into some coherent whole for you. And it's really difficult because there's just things I know. And there's parts of this biblical story where I know, and I'm like, okay, I got to go dig it out and find it. And how much background knowledge do we need to read this? And I'm trying to scaffold it carefully so that I don't sound like a lunatic. And then I can back up my premises with textual receipts and true biblical scholarship from some well-respected scholars, and not these half-assed money-chasing hacks on social media. So we're taking our time, and we hope you're patient. But you've got our agenda, and we'll see you next time.